Hey guys, welcome back. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana, and you are watching Marksman TV. Today I'm going to be doing a thorough guide on all the ins and outs of becoming a federally licensed firearms dealer. So if that sounds interesting to you, please stick around. That's coming up now. Okay, in this video, we're going to cover a lot of topics. We're going to start with a list of qualifying questions you should ask yourself before even considering getting an FFL. Also, what type of FFL you're going to go after or what type of business you're going to build. How to go through the FFL process, getting through the ATF interview, building and establishing your brand, opening and operating your business, as well as some Q&A type questions that I have received from people over the past several years that people have emailed to me who have been aspiring to build their own firearms related business. Now, to lay it out clearly, I am not an attorney and nothing in this video should be considered as legal advice. If you have pertinent questions pertaining to your existing firearms related business or you're thinking about getting an FFL, I would direct important questions to your local ATF field office or to your attorney if you have one. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into this video. Now first, you're obviously here because you are considering opening a firearms related business, or maybe you're just here because you're interested in what it's like, what's kind of going on behind the scenes and what do dealers have to go through to get established. But let's assume first you're interested in opening a firearms store. Now, before getting further down the road, I always like to start with a list of qualifying questions you should ask yourself before considering to go ahead with the application process. Number one is, why are you interested in opening a firearms related business? Now, over the years, again, I get a lot of questions and I've talked with a lot of my viewers here on YouTube who have been interested in opening a business, and the number one thing people say is, I have a burning passion for firearms and all things firearms related. I can relate to that because I too had and still have a huge passion for firearms, which is why I wanted to go into this industry. If the reason you are interested either in full or in part in getting an FFL is because you want to obtain firearms inexpensively, I will tell you, at least new firearms, the margin is very low. If you take something like a Glock, for example, the markup might only be about $40 to $60 depending on where you find it. And that's of course before your costs like credit card fees and things like that when you sell it. So the markup on new inventory is very low. Also, if your main purpose is for collecting, that'll probably be weeded out through the ATF interview process, who will be trying to find out what it is you're planning on doing with your business. Keep in mind, an 01 or any other type of FFL other than an 03, and I'll get into the FFL types, is meant for the purposes of doing business. So you want to make sure that you're going to get your license for the purpose of sustaining your family, either in full or in part. I know people operate FFLs or a business part-time to keep a full-time job. That's fine, but just be sure you know why it is you're doing this and be sure that your reasons for doing so are sustainable, because there is a lot of work involved down the road, as we'll get into. Second question you need to ask yourself is, where are you going to locate? Of course, most people are going to locate close to where they live, the same city, town, or within a close approximation of where they live. Make sure you check out the demographics of what are the gun stores in your region or your area, what markets are they serving, and is there room for you? Do you think that there's going to be enough, or at least enough demand for firearms or related accessories or whatever you're getting into to sustain your growing business in that area? If it's an oversaturated market, you may consider looking at a different market, but you want to be sure that you've thoroughly vetted that before you go through the whole process of getting a license, because part of getting the license is having your location picked out, which we'll get into. The third question you need to ask yourself is, who am I going to serve? Be very sure you've picked out what is your target market, whether it's going to be geared towards hunting, whether you want to be geared towards satisfying the growing female market, whether you want to be involved in recreation shooting, competition shooting, if you like more of the military surplus type stuff, if you want to deal more in a used market. Be very careful about what sort of market you're wanting to get into. I do not recommend going in with the shotgun type approach of having a little bit of everything and trying to see what works. Having that narrowed down and picked out before even beginning the application process is a really good idea to get yourself on track with your business, and something you really want to have picked out first before you move way down the road of getting your FFL. I started out with a thorough business plan that had everything picked out to my location, my key demographic, my target market, and we had a whole financial plan and forecast as well. You don't have to go that extreme. I just come from a business background and that's what I did. But having a plan, having answers to those questions is going to drastically help you moving forward, and I definitely recommend you do that before even beginning your application. The fourth and final question you need to ask yourself is, what is the demand for what I am looking to do, and how am I going to satisfy that? Maybe you live in a rural area in Utah and you and your buddies like to go hunting, but the closest hunting supply store is 40 miles out of town. You're tired of making the trip every time you need shotgun shells or whatever it is you buy. You think to yourself, man, I know the hunting community around here, there is a big demand for hunting equipment and apparel and stuff like that right here in my town that nobody is satisfying. That is what is going to be my goal. That is going to be the market I'm going to be addressing, and I'm ready to move forward with the application process. Now, the next thing you're going to need to decide is what type of FFL you want to have. There is a list of them I'll briefly go over. The first and most common is the 01 FFL. That is what I have. An 01 FFL is just a general dealer in firearms and ammunition. Now, that is Title I firearms, firearms that you can buy and sell over the counter with a standard background check. Anything you can walk into a gun store and purchase with a 4473, that is a Title I firearm. An 02 FFL is a pawnbroker, so they are like an 01 FFL, but they can deal in pawn type of transactions involving firearms. An 03 FFL is a CNR or Curio and Relic license. That is a license for collectors. That is not a business license. If you want a CNR license, it will allow you to purchase and have delivered directly to your home CNR classified firearms without the need to go to a dealer. But with a CNR license, you cannot buy and sell for the purposes of conducting business. It is the only FFL that is not intended for business purposes. An 06 FFL is a manufacturer of ammunition other than armor-piercing ammo. So ammunition manufacturers cannot, with an 06 FFL, cannot deal in any type of firearm transactions. They just manufacture ammo. An 07 FFL, which is the second most common type of FFL, is a manufacturer of Title I firearms. Not only can you manufacture and sell firearms, you can also buy and sell and deal in other firearms already produced. So this type of FFL gives you probably the widest amount of freedom to conduct business in many different facets. An 08 FFL is a firearms importer, and then an 09, a 10, and an 11 deals in destructive devices, which is going to make up a very, very, very small percentage of people watching, so I'm not even going to cover those. Now, on top of all those FFLs, there are 3 classes of SOTs. An SOT is a special occupational tax you can tack on to your existing FFL. So you start with your FFL. Now, the SOTs deal in NFA items or Title II firearms. These are going to be SBRs, short-barreled rifles, SBSs, short-barreled shotguns, machine guns, and suppressors. Now, to get an SOT, there are 3 different types. A Type 1 SOT is to import and deal in NFA items. A Class 2 SOT is to manufacture and deal in NFA items. And a Class 3 SOT is to deal in NFA items. So for example, I am an 01 FFL, which means I can deal, buy, and sell Title I firearms, but I am also a Class 3 SOT, which allows me to deal, buy, and sell in NFA items, but I cannot manufacture them. So that is the route I have chosen to go for my business. So you want to decide what type of FFL is going to best serve or help you answer those first list of questions I outlined. Also, if you want or need an SOT to tack onto that, that's an annual fee that you're going to have to pay for that once a year to be able to deal in NFA items if NFA, suppressors, machine guns, whatever, is going to be part of your business model. Okay, so you've decided you want to go ahead and get your FFL. You've identified who your target market is, what their needs are, how you're going to satisfy them, and where you're going to locate. And you've also decided what type of FFL you're going to pursue. Now you're going to get into the application process. Now before that, you're going to notice on the application there are a couple limiting things that you're going to need to address. At the top of the application, it's going to ask you for your EIN. That's your employer identification number. It's also going to ask you for your business premises. Now that means you actually need to be formed as a corporation, whether it's a limited liability, if you want to be an S Corp, a C Corp, if you're a partnership or a sole proprietor. So you want to know how you're going to structure your business, and you actually need to have your business structured. You can do this yourself, or you can have an attorney help you do this. It wouldn't be very expensive. I think we had our attorney help us do this, and I don't remember it being very expensive. And you're going to want to talk with your business attorney how you should structure your business that best serves you, at least on the tax purposes and things like that, or what limits your liability and that sort of stuff. So when it comes to forming a corporation, an LLC, a sole proprietorship, I'm not going to address that in this video. There's probably a million videos on YouTube that address this, but you're going to want to know what type of business you're forming. You're going to want to form that business, get your tax ID. So you'll need that before you can do the application process. The other thing you're going to need is your actual business location. Now, it is true that you can get your FFL out of your home. I have heard, and this is just through looking at forums and different things like that, that it is more difficult to get a home-based FFL. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. They allow a place for it on the application to identify whether you are zoned residential or commercial, so I assume they will issue FFLs to zoned residential people. I know dealers, we call them kitchen table dealers, who will set up their FFL at home and do transfers and things with their friends. So I did not go that route. If you want to go that route, I'm sure that is an option. Once your business is established and you have your business, your corporation, your corporate address is your home, and you use your home address on the application, at a later time, once the FFL is given to you, you can move the location of the FFL or get a second location if you want to move into a brick and mortar location. So some people use that as a strategy. I myself, we actually found a brick and mortar location, the location we're in now. We knew that the application process would take anywhere from 6 to 12 months to be fully gone through and approved for us to be able to open our doors. So we made a deal with our current landlord to operate at half rent on a monthly basis until 6 months had passed, and then it would go to full rent. So it saved us a lot of money there. But we did have to pay for an empty store for about I want to say 8 or 9 months before we could even operate out of it, which was one limitation. So you can go through different strategies to get past that, but you do have to have your corporation formed and your address, your business location address on the application. That'll be where the ATF comes to give you an inspection and an interview before issuing you your license. So be aware of that as you go through the application process. Okay, so we're ready to go through the application. Now, first and foremost, this is the application form 7. You can get it on the ATF's website, fill it out, and mail it in. Now, for the purposes of completing this, you're going to have, of course, already have your corporation and your address established. So you can fill out all that information pretty easily. You're going to go through and tick all the boxes and answer all the questions as they apply to you and your business. We get down to the FFL selection. You're going to select, we've talked about the different FFL types that there are. An O1, which is the most common, is going to be a $200 fee for your first to get the FFL established. That lasts for 3 years. Every 3 years, your FFL needs to be renewed. It's a $90 renewal fee, so it's going to end up costing you about $30 a year for the license. It's a very negligible expense, all things considered, so it's very inexpensive. The second most common is an 07. That's $150 to initiate your license, and then a $150 renewal fee on top of that. Keep in mind, this does not include your SOTs. I know a Class 3 SOT is $500 every year, so those different classes of SOTs vary, but again, that only pertains to you if you're going to deal in NFA items. Now, Part B establishes you, the applicant, as the responsible person on the FFL. Now, the responsible person is any person that has, I should say, higher level authority within the business. It's going to be the business owner, maybe higher level business officers, or anybody that has the capacity to make important decisions or run and operate the business in your absence. Any one of those people needs to be included as a responsible person on the application. Now, further on down the road, if you hire new people who are going to take over larger parts of your business, maybe a store manager that's going to run your business in your absence, they need to be added as a responsible person. They're going to fill out Section B of the Form 7 application, and it'll be mailed in. You don't need to wait for any type of approval on that. It's just to notify the ATF that you do have a new responsible person being added to your license. Those responsible people can be removed at any time. Say, down the road, your operations or your store manager leaves, goes on to another position, or is fired, you can remove them. Okay, so the questionnaire is going to be almost like a 4473, ask a bunch of qualifying questions. They'll get a background check run on them. They'll need to provide fingerprint cards and photos, passport size photos, like you're filling out a Form 4 for an NFA item, for those of you who have done that. So you yourself will also have to do that in the application process when you're establishing your license. Okay, so your application is complete. You've gotten your fingerprints and your photographs. If you have a business partner, they have done the same. Let's say you're going for an 01 FFL, you filled out your $200 check, and you're going to mail it all into the ATF. Now, I did this about 9 years ago is when I got my FFL, or at least first applied for it. And I remember it taking about 6 to 8 months before I got a phone call and the ATF wanted to schedule an interview with a ATF agent. Once the interview was established, I think we scheduled the interview for about a week later. They came out to my place of business that I had already had, and they conducted an interview with me. So let's talk about what that interview includes. Now, the interview is going to focus around this. This is the ATF handbook, or at least the ATF Federal Regulations Reference Guide. It is about 200 pages cover to cover, and you will go through this with your ATF agent every single page. At least that was my experience, and I've heard is the experience of many others. My interview took about 4 hours. I remember it was in the middle of the summer. In my store, we did not have the utilities turned on, so we had all the lights off. We just had sunlight coming in through the windows, no air conditioning. I wore a suit to the interview, of course, wanting to make the best impression. And we stood at a chest-high counter, or about, I guess, a stomach-high counter, which is where we have our checkout system now, for 4 hours. It was brutal, and we went over this entire book. The reason they're going over this entire book with you is because once they leave and your FFL is issued and your doors are open for business, you are beholden to everything that's in this book. There is no such thing, no excuse as I didn't know or I didn't remember. You have to follow the guidelines within this book. Again, I am not the writer of these laws. I do not endorse these laws. I just follow them. But if you want to operate an O1 FFL, if you want to operate a firearms related business, this is your, for all intents and purposes, Bible of running a gun store. So you have to know what's in here and refer to it. These do get updated occasionally. Another handbook you will be given is the ATF Safety and Security Information Handbook. This goes over what you do in the event that firearms are stolen, how to secure your firearms, how to report them, that sort of thing. So there's that guide. This is a quick handbook for best practices. It's going to answer all of your most common questions that you will get as an FFL holder. This is a poster of the Youth Handgun Safety Act, which you are required to have in your store at all times. So every gun store you go into has this somewhere. This is the complete list of CNR firearms. So we talked about 03 CNR licenses. Those are the firearms that people can purchase and have shipped directly to them as a CNR license holder. So if you are dealing in a business and you get in, say, like a World War II P38, and you have it on Gunbroker or you're selling it online and a customer contacts you and wants to buy it and they have a CNR license, you can ship it directly to their house, so they do not need to go to a dealer to pick it up. But you want to make sure the firearm you are sending them is on this list, or at least falls into compliance with what a CNR firearm is. I'm not going to go over the exact regulation. It's roughly 50 years old from the current date and some other requirements that it has to fulfill as well. Because of some of the vague terminology or some of the vague definitions of what really entails what a CNR license is, a lot of dealers will not ship any firearm to a CNR license holder out of fear of shipping something that is not CNR license, CNR eligible to a private residence, which would be a violation of, I believe, the GCA, so which is a big no-no as a dealer. So some people just choose not to do it. But if you want to deal in CNR firearms and ship those to CNR license holders, that is the reference guide there. You'll also get the Youth Handgun Safety Act notices, which you are supposed to keep available to your customers at all times. So all of this is provided to you as sort of your welcome package as a dealer, and you need to be responsible for it and all of that. So that's sort of a huge part of what the interview entails, is going through all of that information. Also, your ATF agent is going to do an inspection of your premises and make recommendations on safety and security. These are typically known as guidelines. You don't have a certain list of check marks you have to hit when it comes to safely securing your firearms in your store, but they will look at your premises, look at weak points, make recommendations to you. I definitely recommend taking a list of those recommendations and following along with them as best as you can to keep your firearm and your firearms, your inventory, and your business as secure and theft-free as possible. After your interview is complete, you should expect about 2 to 4 weeks time to pass before you are told whether you are approved or denied. If you are approved, simply your FFL will arrive in the mail at your mailing address or your business premises, wherever you elect to have your FFL sent. Now, from that point, you can begin working on opening your doors. Now, a lot of people will start putting in infrastructure into their business, whether you have your storefront already, you're rented and you're moving in. So a lot of people might put in store fixtures, display cases, display racks, and things like that in anticipation of getting their FFL. I can't really recommend going one way or the other. It is more risky to do that. There are a lot of things that can happen, and there's no predetermined amount of time it will take them to give you your license, or whether you will get your license. You could be confused with another person. You could have an error on your application that denies you, and you have to deal with all of that. So I personally waited until we had our FFL in hand before I started building out the store. The build out of my store took about a month, to get all the equipment, to get it installed, to get the store designed the way we wanted it to look. We knew about when our launch date would be. I think we gave ourselves 2 months, so we actually opened August 1st of 2014, which I believe was about 2 months actually after physically receiving our FFL. Once you have your FFL, this will also unlock the door to your wholesaler. So this is going to be a question I'm going to address in the Q&A section of this video, but your wholesalers, who are mainly who you are going to be getting your new product from, will not even let you browse their inventory or their pricing until you have an FFL. They will want your FFL on file before even opening the site for you to look at. So again, you can't even really begin ordering inventory, obviously, because you don't have your FFL to go ahead and to be able to legally receive and sell those items. Now, also be aware that the FFL may not be the only type of license you need based on your area. Here in the state of Indiana, we have to have a separate license to sell handguns in our state, so I had to procure that as well as my FFL. Your state may require similar licensing, so be sure you are aware of that so you don't accidentally open up out of compliance with your local and state laws. The ATF does require you are in full compliance with all your state, local, federal laws before you open your doors, or you have to be in compliance within 30 days of receipt of your 01 or your 07 or whichever FFL. Okay, so at this point you have gone through the application process and you have received your FFL, you've loaded out your store, you begin ordering inventory, and now it's opening day and you're beginning to operate your business. Now, a lot of what you're going to expect here is going to be laid out to you in your initial interview with your ATF field agent. There are a couple things that are very important to keep track of. All firearms that come into your store, whether through private purchase over the internet, private purchase in person, or new inventory purchased through wholesalers, distributors, or directly from manufacturers, all have to go through your A&D logbook. The A&D logbook is sort of the heart of the business and one of the most important things you have to keep track of, short of the 4473. Every single, everything that's defined as a firearm, whether a Title I or Title II, with the serial number or without, obviously before 1967, firearms did not have to have serial numbers, so you will encounter firearms without serial numbers. Every firearm has to go through your logbook. You're going to enter the entry of the firearm based on the make, the model, the caliber, the serial number, the type, the date it was received, and by whom it was received. And every time you sell that firearm or dispose of it, it has to be logged out. So that is part of the reason that this is a very paperwork intensive business. You have to keep on top of this. You have to make sure that everything that comes through your store, everything in your store, is logged into your books, and everything you get rid of is logged out. Now, there is only a couple ways to get a firearm off your books. One is to sell it through a 4473, in which case you log it out to your buyer on your 4473, and you can keep a list of 4473 serial numbers, which you can reference in this book. Another is to another FFL, that is another qualifying FFL, whether it's a firearm that can be shipped to that FFL like an 01 or an 07, or if it's a CNR eligible firearm to an 03 CNR license holder, it can be logged out to that CNR license holder. It can be logged out on a lost or stolen firearm form. So if you lose, misplace, accidentally throw away, or you're broken into and 10, 15 firearms are stolen, you fill out forms, paperwork on those, and you can log them out in that regard. Or these books hold, I think these hold about 600 firearms a piece or so, this particular one. You can, if you get an old book that's maybe 5 or 6 books old and you still have 1 or 2 guns in it, you can log those out to a new line in your current book, so you don't have a bunch of books sitting there with loose entries in them, to keep everything under one book at one time to keep out and with you for logging in and logging out firearms. The other important piece of documentation is the 4473, that is the over-the-counter disposition of the firearm, or the sales background check that your customer will be completing when they purchase a firearm. If you've ever purchased a firearm in a gun store, and I'm sure probably all of you have, that is the application or the form you're filling out. You want to make sure that that is filled out completely, that you are running that correctly through the FBI NICS system, and that you are appropriately logging the response of their background check on the form, and then logging out the firearm once the customer pays and leaves with the firearm and it leaves your premises. So That is a lot of the paperwork. There's other paperwork and forms involved, but you can wait until your ATF field agent meeting to be told about all of those, but that's 90% of what this is going to cover. Okay, that basically runs through the list of getting your FFL and opening your doors. Now, I have, as I've mentioned, gotten questions from a lot of people over the years who are interested in starting their own business. If you want to send me questions, you are more than welcome to do that, but I'm going to try and cover a list of the most common ones, so if I get questions, I can refer people to this video. But of course, I'm always happy to speak with people as well over the phone or an email or anything like that. If you do email me asking for questions, I always respond to those as best as I can. Keep in mind, I do get incredibly busy, and I always like to answer those as they come in. I also get an incredible amount of spam. About 95% of what I get emailed to me in a general day gets deleted, so a lot of times I might accidentally see an email like that or not see it or recognize it and think it's spam and delete it. So please make sure it's very clearly said in the subject line. If you don't hear back from me within a couple weeks, chances are I didn't see it, or it didn't get to me, or I accidentally deleted it, and I do apologize for that. So just resend it or give me a call. Talk to Randy or John and get them to just say, hey, I sent Chris an email, questions about an FFL, we have them check. And I will. I really do like to get to those. I do enjoy reading them and answering them. So if you have sent me questions in the past and I didn't get to it, that is the reason why. So please just forward it back to me and I'll try and catch it. First question. This is not really a question I get directed at me, but a question that's loosely addressed by a lot of people either in my store or over the email. And that is the firearms business worth getting into in this day and age? I will say that is a question. I'll sort of lay it out and let you answer it for yourself. This is a very, 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 very competitive and very, very, very saturated market. When we started seeing a whole lot of purchasing happening, especially during the President Obama years, it really opened the floodgates to FFL holders. I recount that back maybe about 10 years ago in the Indianapolis area, there were maybe 5 dealers. Now there's probably 30. So, just within a 50 to 75 mile radius of downtown Indianapolis. So there are dealers everywhere, and I think that's true in a lot of other states as well. It's a very fragmented industry. It's still very much a cottage mom and pop type industry where most of your FFL holders are small gun shops like mine. We don't have any type of whales like Amazon or Walmart or Target. So there's really no huge dominant players. That is starting to change. We're starting to see a lot of growing large internet-based businesses that are getting bigger and bigger every year and are taking a lot of the market share, not only from the little gun stores, but also from the wholesalers. I'm starting to see that as well. Wholesale type distribution is also sort of an old type of distribution channel or distribution chain setup, which I think will probably be changing in the future as well. So I do see the industry is very fragmented. I see it consolidating, and it's very competitive, especially if you're going to be dealing only in new products. They're widgets, they're commodities. The Glock 19 you buy here is the same you buy in Arizona, is the same you buy in Iowa, so people kind of squabble over $5, $10 in price difference because it's the same thing, which has driven a lot of competition. So yes, it is a fulfilling thing. It's a very challenging thing, and there's not a tremendous amount of money in it unless you really grow your business as something hugely innovative and competitive. So if you have the drive and motivation to do that, it can be a very lucrative business venture. Or if you want to have a modest $30,000 to $50,000 salary, but come in and work in a small gun shop and do what you enjoy doing, to a lot of people that's more than worth it. You can go the route of being a gunsmith. You can go the route of opening a gun range. You can do manufacturing and ammunition or firearms. There's a million things you can do. You can design your own products. You got to sort of figure that out for yourself, but keep in mind, getting into this, it is hugely, hugely, hugely competitive, much more so than it's ever been before. The next question, and probably the most common question I get, is how much money should I have before I even think about opening a gun store? Again, this is a question you have to answer for yourself, but I will give you some direction here. Most businesses are going to fail within about 3 to 5 years, so make sure that you are aware of that and that you're ready to take on that challenge and that risk, especially in a very competitive environment. Not trying to scare anybody away, I just like to kind of show the reality of what it's like getting into this business. It can be very scary in the early years, which I have experienced, and it took a lot of trying of different things to get ourselves to a point that I like to call successful. We're not massive or huge or anything like that. I don't have delusions of grandeur, but I'm happy with where we are, and we've sort of escaped that early phase of the business. With that in mind, what I recommend is you very carefully build a model, a financial model or forecast of all of your expenses. If you've picked out a location or you know what the general cost is of real estate in your area, what the rent is, your common area expenses and things like that, whether you're going to have employees or not. I ran this place by myself for 6 years. I was the only person. I had already had WeBuyGuns.com up and running in my YouTube channel. I was still running everything alone. I had some part-time help, but I didn't really get my first real full-time employees until Randy, which has only been here a year, and my business is 8 years old. So really had to keep expenses down, and finally I was able to start hiring, which is awesome. But know what type of workforce you're going to have, how you're going to pay them, or what you're going to pay them if you're going to pay yourself. A lot of people like to work part-time, keep their day job, run their gun store part-time 2 to 3 days a week. That strategy is totally fine and what might work for you. But if you need to be self-reliant or you need to pay yourself a salary out of your gun store from day one, you're going to go into it full-time. Price that out. What's that going to cost in an annual basis? All of your utilities, unforeseen expenses. If you have legal fees, if you have accounting fees, if you're going to have an accountant or a bookkeeper, or you're going to have an accounting firm file your year-end taxes, figure out all the little minute details of everything that it's going to cost. I would then multiply that number by 3 to 5. 5 if you're going to be conservative, 3 if you're going to be a little less conservative, but at least 3 to 5. And then have the available funding for that number available to you either through your own bank account, your own savings, a private investor, a friend or family member, a small business loan. You need to have that money available to you before you start. If you only have the money available to you, most everybody is going to lose money early on. There are some limited exceptions to that, but most everybody will. You need to have the money to weather the storm, because no matter what, if you run out of money, your doors get closed. If you can't make payroll, you can't pay your taxes, you can't do any of that, your doors get closed, whether you want them to or not. The worst thing is to be on the precipice of success and then have to close your doors because you can't make payroll. So have the money, make sure you have that money before you even start, and have a clear plan on how you're going to do that. If by the end of 3 years you're nowhere close to break even, I recommend to close. Okay, if you're very, very close to break even, I would stick it out for years 4 and 5 and get to at least break even. That would include covering all of your expenses, your salary, your employee salary, and hopefully after year 5 you can start showing positive growth and profitability. But that's a very careful and finicky question you really need to have addressed before you go down the road of starting to dump a lot of money into your business. Another common question I get all the time is based around inventory. That's where do you get new and used product? New product is easy. You're going to get most of that, pretty much all of that, through distributors. So there are a few big ones. That's RSR, Lipsy's, Davidson's, Sport South. Several of them actually closed back in like 2017, 2018. But if you just go into Google and search firearm distributors, you're going to see all the big ones. Now, as I mentioned before, you cannot actually start browsing their inventory and ordering things until you have your FFL on file, so be prepared to create relationships with them once you have your FFL. In my experience, I've dealt with many of the distributors. Some of them are a little bit better in pricing than others on certain items, but their margin of pricing is usually within 5% of each other. So I started really being careful and nitpicking where I was ordering from and from who. But at the end of the day, yeah, if I was paying more money from one distributor to another, it may have only been $5 to $10 more, and on another gun it may have been $5 to $10 less. So I consolidated around a couple distributors. One of the good things about putting all your eggs in one basket is your distributors, you're dealing with a salesperson, and that salesperson works on commission. And that salesperson wants to be able to sell higher volumes of the product to people on the phone more frequently without having to call 30, 40, 50, or 100 people. So if you get a relationship with a salesperson and you're buying a lot of product from them, when you get allocated items, and those are items that are in higher demand that are harder to get, you're typically going to be on the top of their list. So each sales team is divvied out, like say the Springfield SA35, 3 of them might come in to a wholesaler and they may give the 3 to their top performing salespeople, and those salespeople are going to give them out to their best buyers because they want to keep those buyers happy and coming back and buying more. So I like the strategy of really focusing on just between 1 and 3 wholesalers to, again, keep yourself with a good constant influx of phone calls, getting allocated items in, especially in times where inventory is scarce and hard to get, like we saw between 2020 and 2022. because you've been taking care of your salespeople. They're going to call and they're going to give you that ammo or you that highly desired firearm as opposed to a brand new account that they've never done any business with. So distributors is where you're going to get most of your new inventory. Now, when your company is massive and really big, you could probably go direct to manufacturer, but that's going to be businesses the size of like Cabela's or maybe some of the large online retailers. And I don't even know for sure. I assume that they go direct to manufacturer because oftentimes their pricing is as low as what we pay for wholesale on firearms. Now, used inventory is going to come predominantly from obviously the private market. That's going to be, for most people's cases, if you have a brick and mortar retail store somewhere, you're going to have customers approaching you with firearms. You're going to purchase those over the counter. The influx of that inventory, the velocity at which you're getting it, and what you're getting and what you're paying is on a case-by-case basis and totally unpredictable, which is sort of one of the big risks of dealing heavily in the used market, which is what we do. But the margins are higher, obviously, and the turnover is faster because you can sell them cheaper, and people generally like the demand for used inventory. In my experience, is way higher than new. Now, surplus. Another question I get all the time is, where do you source surplus? The surplus market has changed dramatically, at least even over the past 10 years. If we go back to like the 90s and the early 2000s, surplus was very plentiful. It was coming over in large numbers, and even back to the 90s, surplus was not a highly desired type of item. There weren't really collectors. The whole collector of firearm market started around the 90s. Really back the 80s, the 70s, the 60s. I mean, firearms are really just viewed as utilitarian items. That's why you see things like Sporterized K98 Mausers and G43 rifles and things like that. So in the 90s, that's when people started collecting, and a lot of the surplus was coming in, and there was a ton of it. Now, back then, the 90s and the early 2000s, I'll say the 2021 to 2010, you also did not have a huge online presence, especially based in the surplus market. So those distributors bringing them in had to sell them out to little gun stores like mine, where it was often easy to go into a gun store in 2025 or 2010 and or 2010, not 2010, 2010, and you could see a Mosin Nagant or an SKS or a Makarov, and you would readily see those on shelves in small gun shops. It's virtually impossible now for small gun shops to get that type of inventory for a few reasons. Number one, the sheer supply of it's dried up. I mean, a lot of the stuff that's been available for sale has come in. Number two is the stuff that is found is now all being sold to direct-to-consumer online outlets like Classic Firearms or RTI or any place like that. So those places did not exist, or at least did not have a huge market presence until at least the last 5 to 10 years. So now the importers like PW Arms, I know them, I've talked with them directly. They will only do minimum orders on things like the SKSs they bring in at like 200 to 500 units a piece, which for a small gun store is untenable, because you don't have the space or the customer base to liquidate all that. So of course their choice is to go to the direct-to-consumer retailers like Classic, because they can sell 500 or 1,000 or 1,500 units at once. They don't have to worry about selling 5 here and 10 there, which makes their distribution costs a lot less, obviously. Also, they're cutting out the middleman on wholesalers, so their prices, in my opinion, were higher, and having to then a wholesaler having to purchase those like SKSs at their price, the importer price, then selling it to a retailer, and then the retailer selling it to the end market, the price would be even more inflated than it is now. So most of the surplus market has gone direct to consumer. So as a small gun dealer, really the only type of surplus inventory you're going to find or deal in is stuff you're getting from private dealers, or private sellers, I should say, like collectors who maybe have a collection of 10 Mosin Nagants and they stroll in your store one day. But just going to a vendor and purchasing whatever surplus guns you want, by and large, that's pretty much over with. And the final big question I get is, what inventory should I stock? Now, a lot of this goes back to the first part of this video, which is know your key demographic and know what needs they have and how you're going to meet them. Nobody else should be able to answer this question for you. What I stock in my store is vastly different than what a store in South Dakota might be stocking, or even vastly different than what the store down the street is stocking. Again, you need to identify what the need is, what's going to be the central focal point of your business. Are you going to have a lot of reloading components? Do you want to serve that area of the market? Are you going to be focused in sort of older collectibles? Are you going to be focused on AR-15s and Glocks? And do you want customized stuff? Do you want to have a gunsmith who can Cerakote? You want to know what your target is, and you want to build out your inventory based on that. Again, I do not recommend going into it with the shotgun spread type of effect. A couple things of this and a couple things of that. Be very, very learned and studied on your market. Know what your customers want and stock that. Purchasing and stocking a store, especially with new inventory, is very, very expensive. Talking back about how much capital you should have before you get started, you're going to want to know how much beginning inventory you're going to want to have, how many firearms, what accessories, what ammo. You're going to want to make a price plan for that beginning inventory and what it's going to cost you to keep restocking and hopefully growing. I mean, we started with 80 guns. Now we have 200 or 300, I think. So we haven't seen a lot of growth in the last 8 years, but we keep our turnover high. So you're going to want to be able to grow your cash as well as grow your supply, your inventory as well, because that keeps more customers coming back if you have more to choose from. So knowing what you're going to stock is going to be a very internal type of analysis, and you're going to want to really, really craft that beginning inventory and what you continue down the road with to your customer base. Also, a lot of new guns will sit forever, and they will sit and sit and sit. They take up shop space, and they hold up your capital tied up and stuff. You don't want to have to always sell that stuff at a loss or a break even. So making sure you get into stuff that will have a higher likelihood of turning over and turning over fast is going to be key to the success in this business. Well, guys, that is my quick sort of rundown of becoming an FFL and hopefully answering a lot of your guys' questions based on the questions that I get from a lot of my emails. So thank you so much for stopping by and checking out this video. If you did enjoy it, please let me know by hitting that like button. Please also consider subscribing to my channel and hit that bell notification button so you are aware when we are posting new content. If you have any other specific questions, feel free to email me. Again, I'm happy to take a look at that. It might take me a week or two to get back. My email address is in the About Me section of my YouTube channel. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave you off with that. I am Chris with Marksman Shooting Sports and WeBuyGuns.com in Westfield, Indiana. You are watching Marksman TV, and I will see you next time.